Aum Sairam. Hara Hara Shankara, Jaya Jaya Shankara. Episode 47. Shri Mahaswami-The Sage with Eyes of Light. The Diary of a Seeker of Truth, Dr.Serge Demetrian. Dear devotees, now we shall listen to the second section, part 3 of this divine book under the subtitle Around the River Arani. Kottapetta, Rajanagaram Pet, 17th and 18th November 1971. I have finished everything is Ishvara. This morning there was a hurried program at home without the benefit of a river bath. Shri Mahaswami was ready for departure. I have perceived somewhere in me his call to follow him, and I ran, forgetting the wet cloths hung on the string in the open. He walked slowly, and as by an unheard order, those who followed remained farther behind than usual. Even the most unfriendly of the assistants left me in peace. An immense inside diving took shape. The first image which touched me was that of Chandramaulishvara with his threshold golden leaf. The leaf became the three eyes of Shri Mahaswami, then the eyes of the goddess, and afterwards my own eyes. The great friends, smiling in their luminous forms, were flying around. At that very moment, while I continued to walk, Shri Mahaswami entered in me with a rare ease and transparency. For a few seconds, I became purely and simply him up to the tips of the ears. This because I saw that the first portion of his body when he started to replace me was his left ear, and this ear was the last part of himself that I saw when he quit my body. In the meantime, I do not know how I could walk and how it was that I did not fall. What could still be called I seemed to perceive the world around as if lit from its interior by a quiet, faint, luminous radiation. Shri Mahaswami sent me then another state, even rarer, which was a reminder of a similar experience that happened at Karveti Nagar on the top of the hill where the temple of Subramanya was under construction. The mind was as an active entity completely disappeared. I was conscious of this. It was wiped out by a wave of luminous felicity that had left from somewhere on the left side. This time, the last image before the eye disappeared was that of Shri Mahaswami walking in front of me, the head covered by his orange cloth, the danda on the left shoulder, the kamandalu on the right hand. His legs were that of an adolescent, which carefully advanced along a placid footpath of trodden earth in between the rice fields. He seemed to have called here all the elements for accomplishing his intention, starting with the sun who, while rising, kept back his hotter rays and concealed itself now and then behind the clouds. Once the mind had perished, the feeling of I also started to disappear. The last idea was, I have finished, everything is Ishvara. Nothing existed, not even the least of what we call reality behind the nature of the felicity. The wonder lasted only a short period of time. Perhaps the body and the mind, both of which had remained far behind, were secretly gripped by the unexplainable fear at the idea of being liberated of all that could separate me from Shri Mahaswami. There are possibly unconscious areas in which the control of the consciousness is yet to be exerted. In some corners of my interior labyrinths, an ancestral nest of egoity might still be lying insufficiently purified. On the other hand, what seems more plausible, the place and the time were unsuitable for a more important inward experience. I easily came out of this high state as my nervous system had stood the trial well. Sri Mahaswami was always there in front of me. Evidently, the landing of the thought which bore the image of the body is not easy. There was some giddiness and heaviness of the head due to the passage of a rather short transition through a type of clayey area where the purity had to mix with the stony hardness of the material body. Meeting with a group of Harijans from the hamlet of Vellore. They were camping at the limit of the locality just as the gypsies in the Romanian villages before the Second World War. However, they are gentler and accept their fate. The rough peasants who had accompanied them, all of whom were meat-eaters and tobacco smokers, surpassed themselves by ill-treating the Harijans and kept them at a distance of 10 meters. Finally, they were allowed to prostrate. Sri Mahaswami took in his hand the kamandalu that was kept ready by an assistant and waited until they had finished. Then he continued to look at them with an evident goodwill as he lightly waved his head in sign of approval and friendliness. When he had passed them, he stopped and requested two assistants who stood in between to withdraw and once again looked at them as a sign of goodbye. The group of some 40 persons, all men, stood with their hands in Anjali, drinking in Sri Mahaswami as if he were their life elixir. In this hamlet of Vellore, with its straight and half-paved streets, the usual mud huts covered with coconut leaves or straw had been replaced by houses of a more permanent structure, still in the form of huts, and a few buildings of a curious local city-like style. There is not a single temple, in contrast to Kottapetta, Rajanagaram Pet, where there are 5 temples and 2 bhajan halls. Kottapetta, Rajanagaram Pet, 20th November 1971. He alone existed under the form of the old I. I do not know how I could have skipped 2 days. This night there happened to me a long and important experience. The mind had not been able to record it in its entirety because the experience was directed against the inferior part of the mind, which is destined to perish. Actually, the memory had become so tenuous, like a dry leaf wavering on the stem of a delicate eye, that it is already a miracle to have retained some small margin of memory about it. I woke up between 2 and 3 a.m. in the veranda where I was taking rest. Around me, the night was especially calm and noiseless. The sky, covered by a canopy of minute immobile stars, was looking at me. Only the fake stars, the sparks of the fireflies, were drawing abstract patterns near me. I understood that I should not sleep and turned towards Ramapuram, where Sri Mahaswami was staying. I called him by his name while adding also some names of Vishnu Sahasranama. Sri Mahaswami came almost immediately and took me in his charge, however not under the aspect of blessings that blow and pass like luminescent perfumes. He took me into his responsibility by transforming himself into this one. He alone existed to start with under the form of the old I, and then he called my great friends. He totally removed my sight by installing his eyes of light behind my terrestrial ones. He merged his own eyes in those of the great goddess. It was he, in his light form, clothed only by my old body, who wanted to become the form of the great goddess. It was he only who orchestrated with a masterly hand, as I could never do alone, the different influences in the court of the great ones, where he strode as one of theirs. He modulated the influences and organized them after his own plans. He rose to inconceivable heights. He alternated the periods of activity with rest periods. Finally, it was he only who appeased all the forms of action and calmed down the body and the mind. He kept the body of this one straight and his vertebral column vertical. He warded off all headaches. He gently retired. The heights of this experience, from what I had the sanction to remember, took 6 different forms. All of them had been touched twice or 3 times. The succession had been irregular. Chandramaulishvara, the Spatika Moksha Linga, appeared in very transparent mode with his 3-fold leaf of golden bilva. The 3 eyes of the master, those of the goddess and mine, were all at the same time identified with the 3 lobes. Then Chandramaulishvara became very long and took a bluish tint. It stood in front of the vertebral column of what could still be called eye. The 3 lobes of the bilva leaf placed themselves behind my eyes, the 2 lateral ones and the central one. The glare point where the 3 lobes unite, situated between the eyebrows, had been far larger as compared with other experiences, more stable and evolving towards the interior landscape. I felt swollen by an immense force that was inclined to sink into my head in the manner of a huge whirlpool. There was the relatively novel image of a light blade, much like a white sword, which started from the one light point at the root of 3 lobes and was aimed across the length of the body in a mainly downwards direction. Then, following the 3 previous images, there appeared as the 4th one the ocean of ether, whose color shifted between luminous blue and scintillating yellow. Less frequent but not unusual, it appeared as an escape from the body or a getting away from the body. Something that was my real I simply came out of the body from its superior portion, abandoning without regret a statue of a drab color, rigid but not inclined to fall, although it had been left standing supported by nothing. The real I kept me above the abandoned structure and was situated higher than its head. The detachment had been so total that I asked myself, what will I do now? And what about entering the heart and experimenting with death in the manner of the young Venkataraman who became Ramana Maharishi? I discovered what I thought was the opening of the heart and I tried to glide through it. I could not correctly say if I had been inside or outside. I only felt that the left half of my body, starting with the chest and the arm, ceased to live. I wondered why the legs were not getting numb first, as with Socrates when he had swallowed hemlock. Then I do not know what happened. I must have gone anew through one of the experiences of absolute light or infinite light. Finally, the normal consciousness was regained. After having repeated twice or 3 times every experience, I thought that everything had finished, as Sri Mahaswami led me once again into the presence of the great friends. Everyone, in their own way, loaded me with richness. They were accompanied also by Sri Rama, who had been the most generous and benevolent. Or perhaps I was better prepared to receive his gifts. Sri Rama came under the aspect of a concrete pillar of bluish light that completely invaded the vertebral column. I perceived a special freshness on the top of the head, and I felt immediately how that light filled me up to the brim. This experience of the fire pillar has been the first true spiritual phenomenon which I experienced at the age of 40 in Romania, and which I came to know several times since in different degrees. What a difference it was this time as compared with the first experience. This time there was no emotional outburst, no mental upheaval or psychic trouble, though it is true that 8 years had passed in between these 2 episodes. However, this night I felt some sexual irritation, which is something that happens less with the passing of time. Perhaps for a short moment I concentrated on Shivakami Sundari, the beautiful one who loves Shiva, that is Parvati. There are yogis who meditate on the feeling experienced during the sexual act. With me, this feeling has appeared involuntarily by chance or in order to inculcate a negative teaching. Devotees, we shall continue to listen to Around the River Arani in the coming episode, bowing at the holy feet of the Gurus, Aum Sairam. Hara Hara Shankara, Jaya Jaya Shankara.